Woohoo!
Well, let's talk about another value that could conflict with freedom. What if I'm someone who likes to take other people's stuff? You know, like, I see your stuff, I like it, I want it. I don't even recognize your right to it. I want it, it's mine, I'm going to take it. If I'm bigger, I'm stronger, I'm able to, I'm just going to take it from you.
Yeah.
That's the sort of radical individual freedom argument.
Yeah.
Right? So what value or anything else is conflicting with my ability or my right to take whatever I want to from this world?
Well, in the case of just normal, average people that have like money and jobs and possessions, but not necessarily a lot of them, I would say that taking things away from them would be a conflict of both their happiness and their freedom in a way that you can't, that if you don't have enough money, you can't do what you want to do, or even when it comes down to it, live.
I think that makes sense for people who are on the borderline of the financial system. Well, hey, let's talk about those 1%ers. You could take a bunch of their money and they wouldn't even notice it. They could still have the freedom to do whatever they want to.
Yeah.
So, should we do that?
I think that I'm going to have a very, very hard time trying to think of anything that is even vaguely ethically wrong with taking away a billionaire's money.
What we're actually talking about here are property rights. And you are a firm believer in people's right to possess things, as long as those things are necessary for them to live or pursue happiness, I guess.
I would say that's a pretty good summary of my argument.
And so you think that it's okay then to take the possessions of those who might have more than they need?
I think that laws are important to maintain both a sense of freedom, of safety, of happiness. So I don't think that people should just be allowed to run around and go over to a billionaire's mansion and be able to just take whatever they want from him without consequence. But I think that in the case of, just throwing out an example here, taxation laws, billionaires have significantly more than they could ever conceivably spend, and so it would not be unreasonable to take away a lot of their money.
And I think that your position on that is a classic internet position right now. And I'll give you one that's even more prevalent on the internet. People think it's fine to steal media from large media companies, right? Even though it is their legal possession.
Yes. I think that pirating media online is by far the most acceptable and defended and commonly done crime. And I think that the argument most people use is, I don't care. Like, these media companies, these giant companies like Netflix or Disney or whatever, they have so much money. They don't care about me. I don't care about them. So I'm going to take this from them, and I'm not going to feel bad about it.
For sure. That's definitely the way the argument goes. I think, though, that if we really got down to it, we could probably find a way that that's a bullshit argument. Not every media company is rolling in money, right? Media companies go out of business.
Yeah.
Right? And media companies lay people off when their revenues fall short. Right? And so those people who got laid off can't afford to buy groceries, can't feed their kids, can't send their kids to school, can't buy clothes, whatever it might be, right? And that could be a direct result of online piracy, reducing that media company's revenues.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
there are consequences, and it is theft.
Yeah, there's definitely an argument to be made about pirating and why pirating is not necessarily morally wrong, but it's not an argument that can be summarized so shortly or is so obvious or clear or direct or completely and utterly morally right as some people like to say it is.
Well, for sure. And, this is a common thing on the internet. There's this sort of thing that corporations aren't real and don't matter. But corporations are literally just collectives of people.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's all there. They're collectives of shareholders. They're collectives of employees. And all of those people have come to some agreement of what's fair.
Yeah.
That's what a corporation is, right? It's a collective of individuals. It's not some anonymous thing that is not human at all.
No. I think that people on the internet, or just people in general, find in a lot of cases, even outside of piracy and corporations, that dehumanizing a large group of people is an incredibly easy way to make their argument sound morally sound.
Of course, and it's very easy to dehumanize a corporation and sort of strip it of its actual human roots.
Yeah.
Let me step back for a second here. You started with the base assumption that property rights exist and should exist. But let me just challenge that for a second. Why should anyone have the right to own anything and deprive anyone else of that thing?
Because people like to own things.
That's it? Is this because we like to?
Because, hey, people like to live in houses and apartments and just buildings in general.
Well, they can listen, you can live in your house, but, listen, if I'm passing through and I need a place to stay, I'm going to come stay in your yard.
Yeah, I don't really know what to say to that.
Interesting, right? What's the foundation of property rights? Like in relationship to freedom? Can you frame property rights in a freedom-based argument?
The way the United States started, even before independence was declared, the way that area of land was sorted into something owned by the British monarchy was by taking away all that land from the people that are already living there.
The Native American civilizations had a much lower sense of property rights.
What they did was not somehow take away the land that Native Americans owned. British people rolled on in, and they're like, hey guys, you have an epic place here. And the Native Americans were like, yeah, we do. And then they were like, we're gonna take this place and we're gonna live in this place. And I don't think there's any real argument to be had that they were totally allowed to live in that place until they started saying that the Native Americans, people that were already living in that place and had happily been living in that place for generations, could no longer live in that place.
I think we're getting into this question, this fundamental question of property rights. I think, casting broad strokes, we could say that the Native Americans were living in a society that didn't actually have a fundamental value of property rights.
Yeah.
And the Europeans came from long-established societies where property rights were fundamental to their societies and inflicted property rights onto the Native Americans.
Yeah. And by the very definition of property rights, then made those properties private and took away the communal sharing of land and life away from the group of people.
So I guess I'm going to go back to my first question. Why should anyone own anything? Like, or is that a fundamental human value that is rooted in the value of freedom or some other important value? Or is that just some historical coincidence?
There's an argument, there's a point to be made behind someone owning something of sentimental value, something that is important to them personally, or someone owning something small, like some sort of sleeping bag or flashlight or phone or anything like that. But when it comes to property, essentially splitting up the earth into millions of tiny little pieces of land that can be bought and sold, there is no fundamental, intrinsic, evolutionary or instinctual or genetic need behind owning land.
Well, I think that we're getting into something deep here. I would probably argue that given how prevalent it is, that is, property rights are in the world right now, that there probably is some value, right? That is supporting that. Like,
Yeah.
that it seems somewhat inhuman, right? That we would just create this random law that didn't support any value whatsoever.
Well, I think that what I brought up before was happiness.
I think happiness is part of it, but I think that's generic. Do you know what I mean? I don't think that gets us exactly to the point. Here's one that maybe gets you a little closer: the right to privacy.
Yeah.
Right. That's one reason I don't want other people coming into my house, even though they may need a place to stay. Is I don't want them around.
Yeah, and that in some way it comes back to freedom and security, because someone staying in your house instead of out on the street could definitely offer a sense of safety for them, but it would also take away your freedom.
What property rights enable you to do from a freedom-based standpoint is it gives you the right to control that thing however you want to.
What property rights give you, in a sense of freedom, is the ability to do whatever you want to do with the property.
Exactly. Right? So I think that would be the freedom-based argument for property rights, is that human beings want to be able to control things.
Yeah.
And do whatever they want to with those things.
Mm-hmm.
And if other people have the right to take those things from them or whatever else, then it interferes with their right to have complete and total control over those things.
Yeah.
But still, it's not obvious.
No.
Right? I don't think it's quite as obvious as you first thought it was when you first were like just assuming property rights.
No.
I think we're going to have to get into that a little bit at some point.
Yeah, there's so many things that are deeply built into the societies that we live in today that we don't think about them that much. But when you do think about them, the issues are a lot less obvious and more complicated than you originally assumed.
So I guess you're kind of on the side of property rights.
Yeah, we just haven't really gotten into it that much. So I can't really make, like, you've questioned a lot of my beliefs today, and I can't really make as firm of an argument as I could have, like, a while back when I was just living as I was. So learning more about it, I feel, would let me make a stronger argument from one side or the other.
Does it matter who might take your stuff? And specifically, is there a difference between an individual taking something from another individual and the government taking something from another individual?
That's a question that leaves a lot of room for assumption. But I think that when it comes to an individual stealing from another individual in terms of, like, a starving man stealing a loaf of bread, then that would be a pretty justified action in comparison to, the government just coming over and taking whatever they want. But if it comes to an individual stealing from another individual in terms of, like, a rich person taking someone's house, then that would be significantly less justified than the government taxing people for the sake of the public good.
I guess what you're saying then is, in general, the government has more right to take property from individuals than individuals do from other individuals.
I think that the government taking away money from other people and putting that money into the collective people is a concept that I will 100% back. the government, depending on the government in the decisions it's making and then what it's actually doing with that money and how much money it's taking away and who is taking that money from, can sometimes not be justified.
But in general, the government does have a right to take individual property for the collective good.
Yes.
And individuals in general don't have the right to take things from other people.
Yes, I'll say that.
If I were to try to reformulate that, you think it's okay for my individual property rights to be infringed for the common good.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that ties into the question of, is it okay to take something from a billionaire?
Yeah.
But let me throw out the other value where I think that billionaires would disagree with the mass confiscation of their resources, and that is fairness. Like, the government's not allowed to do it to you. They shouldn't be allowed to do it to me. What we're talking about is everyone getting treated the same, right? Playing by the same rules.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why should the rules be changed for me just because I'm good at it? I mean, that's really, I think, the hardcore capitalist argument against increased taxation for rich people.
I think that if you're arguing for fairness and everyone getting treated the same, then by far the most fair thing to do, with disregarding everything else, any intrinsic rights or freedom or whatever, the most fair thing to do, and the thing that would make it most equal, would be taking away everyone's stuff, dividing it all up so that it's into equal portions for each person, and then giving it out for each person, and that would definitely involve billionaires getting significantly less money.
So I think that we're beginning to see, by talking about the value of freedom, that even though you consider it a universal value of humans, that there's some nuances, there are some conflicts that arise when you even begin to describe political problems through that universally agreed upon lens.
Yeah. It's really interesting that although freedom seems obvious and clear when you're just looking at the definition, when applied to real world problems, it becomes a lot more complicated.
Well, and so that's what we're going to do over the next few episodes. We're going to look at specific political issues that are real conflicts in this world. And we're going to analyze them based on the concept of freedom. And we're going to define or try to understand, is one side more on the side of freedom than the other? Or is there some other virtue overriding the right to freedom?
Yeah, and I think also, ultimately, what our entire channel is about is coming to the decision, which one is right?
And is it clear? Is there obviously a right one?
Yeah, and is there a right one?
And that's going to be crazy, because a lot of these issues we're talking about, like, it's literally split 50-50 right down the middle in terms of people's opinions.
Yeah, and they're very subjective issues to be talking about.
Yeah, so now we're going to get into it for sure.
We hope that you enjoyed that video, and if you did, please consider checking out the next one in the series.
Or some of our other series on philosophy and life.
We upload videos every Friday, so don't forget to like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. See you next week.